All proceeds from the sale of this DVD are donated to the Diving Diseases Research Centre. If you're watching an illegally made copy, you're helping to deprive Britain's only diving research charity of much-needed funds.
Well, I had no reason to expect to get a bend after the dive because it was a perfect dive, no problems at all.
I started making my ascent and I actually managed to complete all my decompression. I didn't miss any stops at all.
But 40 minutes after the dive, suddenly I became very, very ill in a matter of seconds. It was very, very dizzy, I was violently sick and I was virtually paralysed from the waist downwards.
On reaching the surface, I felt very tired and cold, but I had been in the water 2.5 hours, so that's nothing out of the ordinary. So I laid down in my cabin. After about half hour I started getting tingling feelings in my feet and I thought this isn't right, so I got my colleague to get an oxygen set, so I started breathing pure oxygen and also instructed him to call the Coast Guard. During that time they took some time to come out, the symptoms started getting worse and by the time the helicopter came I was unable to walk. I was more or less full paralysis below my waist.
It was very frightening. And my mates rushed me back to Mountbatten Slip, where I was rushed up to the hospital in an ambulance, and then the DDRC took over and took me over to one of the chambers.
Help! Diver in distress!
When divers go underwater, they carry air cylinders. It consists of 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen. When divers breathe from their tanks at the surface, they're breathing air at the same pressure as the atmosphere. As they go underwater, the air goes into their lungs at a greater pressure and becomes more concentrated. The dissolved oxygen is rapidly used up by their cells, but if the diver comes back up to the surface too quickly, any dissolved nitrogen can form a bubble. Any trapped bubbles in the body's tissues can cause serious damage. The administration of oxygen may encourage these bubbles to dissolve back into the blood and leave the lungs normally, as well as benefiting any damaged tissue.
The bubbles might be in the blood vessels, causing sort of an acute shortage of oxygen downstream from the bubble, or it could cause direct damage in the tissues and cause quite a sort of an inflammatory effect afterwards. So sometimes people will have symptoms of decompression illness and then get a bit better, only for their symptoms to return again a few hours later.
What's your problem?
One thing we do know is that the sooner you can treat somebody, then generally the better the outcome will be. So if a diver's ever in any doubt that something's not right after a dive, coming up for an assessment with a diving doctor is really important.
First thing is getting them into the boat, and that can be a problem depending on the sort of boat that we've got. And then as we get them aboard, it's using other people on the boat to actually provide the support, the oxygen that we need and the other bits of first aid equipment. And then at the same time, we need to remember that there's still possibly divers in the water and not to forget those divers in the water.
Where's your buddy to? Over there. All right, somebody keep an eye out for his buddy.
First aid terms, we can do a lot to help the diver. If we've got first aid oxygen on board and fluids and just water really in that case, we can do a lot to actually prevent the situation deteriorating.
ABCs, getting somebody on oxygen, making sure that they're all right from that sort of perspective as in any first aid training. But if out at sea, it's best to get the Coast Guard involved, Channel 16. And they liaise very, very closely with the lifeguards and us, and we sort of keep in touch and have sort of training events with the Coast Guard locally if we can help it, so we do work very closely with them. If you're on land, and if somebody's quite unwell, then you can call an ambulance, but to tell a paramedic to give us a phone as well, because diving medicine is such a small part of medicine. There's not that many people who've maybe got experience of dealing with these incidents, and we're more than happy to help.
One of the issues is how much oxygen to carry. And certainly, if you're operating any distance offshore, the standard D-size cylinder, which comes with a lot of first aid kits, is really not adequate. It is necessary to make a realistic risk assessment of how far offshore you are, how long it's going to be, before you can actually access emergency services and make sure that you've got adequate oxygen on the boat that you're operating.
A well-prepared diving operation will ensure there's enough oxygen available for more than one casualty. Divers don't normally dive alone. Fluids and oxygen are the key to first aid. The oxygen should be administered non-stop until the casualty arrives at the DDRC or other hyperbaric facility. Occasionally, a casualty's symptoms can appear to be getting worse while the oxygen is being administered. This is no reason to stop. The early and constant administration of oxygen is crucial for a positive outcome for the patient.
Yeah, we've got a diver who's just done a rapid descent from 30 metres and he's got serious pain in his right shoulder. He's conscious, but he's in a lot of pain. Over.
First of all, the Coast Guard are the first point of contact. They are effectively going to manage the other services in support of your incident and assist you with sorting out the situation. Once the Coast Guard get the system going, then the likelihood is you may well have direct contact, particularly if you're within mobile phone range, direct contact from a diving specialist doctor who will be able to assist you.
Hello. Hi, DDRC. Hello, yeah. Sorry we couldn't get you on the radio, you're breaking up, yeah. The casualty is conscious, with a lot of pain in his right shoulder.
If somebody's particularly unwell and they need, their ABCs sort of looking after and sorting out, then sometimes people do end up in the emergency department, but quite often, just for the fact that diving medicine is quite such a specialised field, it is better that we are involved early to try and help expedite treatment, because the sooner somebody gets treated, the better their chance of recovery on a longer term basis.
Speed is of the essence. The casualty will normally be picked up by either helicopter or ambulance. The DDRC is only a short distance from the region's largest hospital. The casualty is looked after by a paramedic en route to the DDRC, while the specialist team are on standby for their latest emergency arrival.
Every diver needs to be aware of the possible symptoms of decompression illness, not just for themselves but also for the people around them, because quite often the diver who's affected by the DCI might be the last to realise that they've got a problem, or certainly to admit they've got a problem and be in quite bad denial about what's going on. So it's having an awareness of symptoms, but also an understanding of what to do in terms of sort of first aid and evacuation plans, and planning in advance so you know what to expect, making sure things like your radio is functioning and the oxygen cylinder's full. Simple things which can have quite a huge difference if things were going wrong. Oh, hi Graham, my name's Christine. I'm one of the doctors that works at DDRC. How are you feeling?
I'm okay. I think my shoulder's sore. This shoulder here's sore.
Right, can you tell me a wee bit about what happened?
It was just a normal dive.
If you don't feel comfortable after a dive, then it's better to assume that it is a decompression illness incident and deal with it, take the first aid, go and seek medical assistance, and at least that way you've made sure that you're not going to get any worse or end up in disabled in some way. And the second really is that it's important for those around the diver to be aware, for all of us to be aware of those we're diving with, and to notice if there are things that are different about them after a dive. Any of those differences, however small, it's better to respond to them there and then, do something positive rather than just let it go.
And what we're going to do now is we're going to give you this mask. If you just want to hold it on and just breathe the oxygen that's on it.
A phenomenon that is widely recognised is this process called denial, and whether it's a symptom of decompression illness itself or whether it's because of perceived pressure from the divers' peers, it's not known, but that can lead to late presentation and people sitting at home hoping things are just going to go away, and they don't, and then often it's harder to treat when we do finally see them.
And I do a lot of diving and dive with a lot of different people. And I see people who've got, fairly obviously have got symptoms, and they think, I'll go home, have a hot shower and it'll go away, or perhaps take a couple of aspirins, or perhaps breathe a bit of oxygen on the boat. Whereas really what they should be doing is thinking, this isn't right, this is symptoms of decompression sickness. They should ring the relevant people, i.e. DDRC.
According to my computer, I had virtually the perfect dive, and yet I still got a bend. So basically it can happen to anybody at any time, irrespective of conditions or you dive. So really everybody should be aware that it can happen, and therefore we do need places like the DDRC.